Welcome to our session on industry standards. Hope everybody's having a wonderful day. We have a phenomenal panel for you this afternoon. I'll introduce myself first. I'm Anne Flanagan. I'm with the Reality Labs Policy Division at Meta, and it is my great pleasure to be joined here today. Over on the far right here, we have Claudia Del Pozo. She's the Executive Director of Ion Resilience Lab at Sea Mines. We have Simone Kliass, co-founder and vice president at the Brazilian Extended Reality Association, XRBR. We have Amy Hedrick, CEO and founder at Cleanbox Technology. And beside me here, we have Jesus Serrano, who's a principal program manager focused on industrial metaverse at Microsoft. Good afternoon, everybody. Why are we here today? Well, the internet of today is based on standards that were developed back in the 80s, the 90s, when we look at Web 2 in the early 2000s. And there are a lot of questions right now over how the metaverse will develop. Will we have similar standards? We keep hearing about the next generation of the internet. Internet protocols, APIs, even now how we develop equipment and devices are all standardized to some degree, but how does that translate into the metaverse? That is what we are here to understand here today. And what lessons can we learn for the evolution of the metaverse? More specifically, why should all of you here in the room here today and everybody watching this stream care about this topic? Others have already started this work, and we're going to hear today about some of the standards organizations and cooperation organizations that have sprung up, and maybe about how you could potentially get involved. I'm going to start, though, with hearing from Jesus. Jesus, good afternoon. Jesus is a bit of an industry veteran, and we'd love to know a little bit about the evolution of interoperability of the internet, how you think it translates to the metaverse. Your career, of course, has crossed over many sectors, including health, education, retail, and now you're also looking at sports, which is very exciting. And the topic of innovation within each arena seems to be the common denominator. So when talking about innovating for the future, what can people here today understand and learn about how the evolution of the internet and now the metaverse can learn about interoperability? Why should we be developing standards? And what should be happening? So Jesus, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you. Well, you were doing a lot of topics together. My feeling here is that, first of all, the different categories of the metaverse are going to be different in terms of innovation. Okay, innovation is a topic that applies to everyone, but what is new or is innovative in one industry could be massively adopted or completely mainstream in others. Okay, so regarding the differences between the metaverses, okay, we used to differentiate in three main areas of innovation that also in some way fit with the flavors of the metaverse that we are seeing out there. Okay, the first one probably is the industrial metaverse. That is the one that I'm working on. This metaverse is much more advanced than what the people think normally. Okay, this is obviously related with IoT technologies that are pretty mature right now, 5G, and it's basically how to blend or how to connect the physical world with the digital world. One of the latest deployments that we have done is during the World Cup. I don't know if anyone is following the World Cup. Just to let you know that all the stadiums at the World Cup are managed from the same room. Okay, for the first time in history, 8 stadiums are completely 100% controlled from the same room, and that's thanks to the kind of power of the industrial metaverse. Okay, then would be another one that is commercial or enterprise metaverse. Okay, all those experiences that we are seeing for the consumer space also, and especially during the pandemic, many people became a little bit tired of this kind of conference where everybody's watching you through a camera. You are at home, okay, wearing your pajama probably, and you don't want to activate your camera because it's a little bit tiring to have this kind of conversation. So I can tell you I've been driving many sessions in the physical world about innovation and co-ideation, and that's something that makes the magic to be together. What happens when you apply that to remote meetings? Okay, it doesn't work in the same way. So this is not only about bringing your avatar to a 3D environment. It's about productivity. It's about connections. It's about interacting and talking to you. When you are talking to the camera, you are talking to your monitor. When you are in a 3D environment, if you talk to me in a 3D environment, I will move my hair to look at you. Okay, so it's a completely different way of connection. And finally, the consumer space, okay? 99% of the information that we see out there is about consumer space and how these apply to games, to the evolution of the interactions. Specifically, the other day I was reading some information saying that the biggest digital twin ever has been created with Flight Simulator. Okay, it's basically a physical representation in real size and super precise of every city of the world through a representation in a game at the end that is for flying. Okay, so this is mostly it in terms of how we see the three worlds. But you were talking about specifically about standards, and also some governments and policymakers are paying a lot of attention to what should be a standard in terms of formats, GLTF or USD scenes, okay, for how to communicate data from one place to another place, and also how to identify yourself, like the identity. The European Commission, for the ones of you that are coming from Europe, you know it, but the European Commission is pushing hard for having a common digital identity that is based also in a blockchain technology that is the only one approved by W3C. I don't know if anyone in the public now, the audience knows what is the only technology that is already approved by W3C based on blockchain. Is decentralized identity. The reason you haven't heard about it is because it's not meant to make money for any other one. It's meant to protect your identities and be able to protect that information that you don't want to share with others, okay? But that's super important because it would allow your identity would be wrapped with your physical appearance, with your assets that you own, and you will be able to move from one place to another place across the three different metaverses. So that's mostly, in a nutshell, what is my view on how the industry has a view on all of this, and also how the standards can apply across.
That's a fantastic landscape review, Jesus, and I love the way you talked about the sort of the tech stack, if you will, the experiences at the top, how people can move freely, assets, avatars, all of that type of thing, moving into data, digital identity, and of course that's where policymakers pay a lot of attention, is around data. I want to come back to that, but I'll turn to Amy. Amy, you are the CEO and founder of Cleanbox Technologies and very much in the B2C and the B2B space. Would love to learn from you about the consumer tech space and how you're so close to people right now and what they really expect. Are there areas where industry should be doing better to collaborate and to develop best practices to really serve consumers? Is there anything that should be happening right now that industry should be doing either collectively or in the individual level to further the opportunity of the metaverse?
Yes, absolutely. And just for those of you who don't know what Cleanbox does, we can decontaminate shared devices to healthcare standards in 1 minute. And that's not only important from the business side, but from the consumer side as well. And yes, I love, I've been involved in the immersive tech space for not as long as you have, Jesus, but for a long time, number of years. And I love to see it grow. I love the magic that's created by using these technologies, because it is absolutely disruptive when it comes to education, to engagement, to a number of industries. But when you're asking about how the consumer engages in the metaverse and how does that pertain to standards, you have to remember that from a consumer's point of view, there's a very wide range of understanding of what the metaverse is. And frankly, I think also for many people in the metaverse industries, it means a lot of different things. And so, from a basic point of view, when companies are engaging, their ultimate goal is to engage the end consumer. That is literally what their product does. Whether you're a business doing it inside your business, or you have some sort of experience that goes to someone outside of your business, an end consumer. When you think about why it's important to engage, it's because that end consumer will determine if your product or experience you've built has legs, if it can be scaled, if there is potential for it to become something more. And there has to be, from the business side, a quantifiable ROI, which many industries are starting to do very, very well. And it also has to be engaging to the consumer. So when you think about ways to collaborate, ways to work together, think about somebody putting on your headset or your haptics or your, or taking their cell phone, whatever your piece of hardware, piece of experience platform is, and what will be those barriers for them doing that. When you think about what are the barriers of entry to making this scalable, you're thinking, what are the barriers of entry for someone wanting to do this more than once, over and over again? There are lots of things that you can think about, whether it be hygiene or safety standards or instructions on how to use a piece of equipment like a VR headset, for example, easily and quickly, how to educate people, and so on. And for there to be broader adoption, I think that looking at standards as in a positive way is important. You start to collaborate and say, not like, what am I being, what are these standards going to stop me from doing, but what are these standards going to create? What kind of a platform are they going to create that actually allows the entire ecosystem to grow? And so I'd really love to see some more of that. And to that point, I actually am involved in a number of standards committees across the board for helping not only create standards that make sense, but also helping elevate the conversation to educate about, so that someone doesn't come in and say, hey, this should be different because of something they might not know what they're talking about, right? So helping that space. So I'm involved in XRA, which is one of the organizations that we work with, and Meta Standards Forum, and so on. And again, because I want this space to grow, because I see so much potential and I love the magic that's out there. And so having this conversation is important to make that space.
Absolutely, thank you, Amy. And I love what you said there about reducing barriers to entry. Love to learn a little bit more about those standards for it in a few minutes. On a sort of a perfect segue, if you will. Simone, you are obviously in XRBR, I should say, in Brazil. And I didn't mention we have a very multicultural panel here today. I'm from Ireland, Jesus is from Spain, Amy representing the USA, Simone from Brazil, and Claudia from Mexico. So we have a lot of representation here today, which is fantastic. But Simone and XRBR in Brazil, you are working with a lot of SMEs. And I'd love to know a little bit more, if you could tell the room here today, why is supporting standards development important for them? Smaller companies have smaller budgets, they're focused on scaling, focused on fundraising, focused on innovating, the super exciting space of the Metaverse, VR, AR, all of these amazing XR technologies. Why is this something they should be spending time on?
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being here with you. How many Brazilians we have here today? Oh, great. I bet the others are waiting for the World Cup that's going to start soon. But yeah, today 70% of XRBR members are SMEs. And they have been working with XR for years, and now that Metaverse is catching attention, they want to be part of it. So supporting standards is very important for the SMEs, and I wrote down some reasons. First of all, SMEs, like you said, have smaller teams and less money to spend, and especially now after the pandemic, they are kind of living in survival mode. Most of them doesn't have a R&D department. So SMEs take advantage of the work that are being done by the big players. And then they can have more time to concentrate on creativity, innovation, and to spend the money in good decisions, in people, equipment, knowledge. Second point, most of the time, SMEs work as groups. So XRBR, our association, is an example of this. XR Latam is another great example of this. They are doing a wonderful job supporting SMEs in Latin America. And when the small players have the opportunity to take part in a discussion with big players, they are part of the decision. They are making the decisions too. This is very important, especially for foreign countries like Brazil. This is a huge deal. And the third point is that Metaverse Standards Forum, for example, works as a seal of approval for investors and partners of these companies. It shows to the market that they are taking part in big and large discussions, and they are using their resources wisely. So just 3 examples, but I could tell a lot more, but we don't have time. However, it's good to remember that large companies have a lot to learn from smaller ones. That's why we are here. So small companies work closely to the consumer, and they can use this feedback to make decisions fast, while the big companies can work to create a foundation of process, systems, products. The small companies can notice some details that might be missed by the big ones. I have an example that one developer that I know, he found a headset issue. And then right after, the big company solved this problem, resulting better user experience and even preventing an accident. Just one example. I can tell plenty. So the point is, everybody, small, medium, and big companies are working together to create a metaverse. Creativity always should be flexible, but the standards help us concentrate on what matters, create a diverse, inclusive, and open metaverse together to everybody.
Thank you so much, Simone. And I think we've heard from Jesus and Amy and Simone about standards and why we might want to consider standards. There are, of course, other forms of quote-unquote interoperability and openness that can be explored in the metaverse. And in that respect, I'd like to turn to Claudia. Claudia, could you share with us a little bit about what it takes to create standards that take into account maybe the lessons of Web 2.0. So I think we're all looking at responsible innovation now. We all want to be very, very ethical in how we do business and how everyone is going to collectively build the metaverse. Your organization has partnered with us in Meta, for example, on initiatives related to AI ethics and also dialogue series on future metaverse opportunities. What do you want the XR community to learn from partnerships such as this, and how do you see that space of interoperability evolving in terms of cooperation, so softer measures than standards per se?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank you for having us here. It's a pleasure. So on the ethics questions, how can you, and also I think this relates a lot to the lessons of Web 2. I think in Web 2 what we saw is a lot of decisions coming from leading countries in the conversation, which were the richer ones, leaving a lot of countries, like you mentioned, foreign countries, the ones that are kind of like outside of this conversation, leaving us out and, creating an internet that's not really inclusive, that doesn't really represent the needs or attend the needs of the entire world. And with ethics, I wanted to bring a few examples of interesting cases across the world where you'd be surprised that they think differently than the leading thought kind of put out there. So recently in South Korea, the current president, when he was running, and another candidate from an independent party, created deep fakes of themselves to be able to get closer to potential voters in more rural areas. And that was really well received, this idea of being closer with the potential candidate at the time. It also allowed them to use this technology to correct for certain things that were seen negatively about them, which is another ethical topic. But this idea that deep fakes of the presidents or potential candidates were so welcomed really, I think, is very different than the ideas in Western countries where we're like, no, deep fakes should not happen. Also, looking at ethics in Latin America, I think it doesn't have to be the case, but privacy and security are kind of, it's one or the other right now. I don't think it has to be, but that's the case right now. In Latin America, where there's a lot of crime, I think that facial recognition cameras in the streets are being a lot more welcomed than in other countries, in cities where they've banned facial recognition in the streets. So how do you integrate that in a conversation? Well, you need to make the conversation truly global. And like you mentioned, we are a global panel here. We've been working on this for a couple of weeks, trying to make sure we represent the different angles. And I think that's something that's really exciting. And Jesus, you mentioned, in the European Union, how they're trying to use blockchain to create one digital identity. I mean, if you think of Mexico, Mexico doesn't have a national identity system. There's the voter system, but it doesn't encapsulate everyone. So you know, a lot of times the European Union, what they do is taken, maybe not immediately as a standard, but as a best practice. But what do you do in countries where, you know, you're not even aware that that doesn't even exist yet? So I think it's really, really interesting. And one of the lessons of Web 2 is this lack of inclusion. And I think that one of the silver linings of the pandemic is that suddenly we were able to participate in spaces that we couldn't be in before, you know? A few weeks, I was just telling Simone, I was in a conference in Rio from my house in Mexico City. So hopefully for the development of the metaverse and Web3, we're gonna have like inclusive spaces online, but also in person, because we'd miss each other all otherwise. And so in terms of our collaborations with Meta and other partners, how are we contributing to that conversation being global? I didn't mention, my organization is called C-Mind's Eon Resilience Lab. And we're a women-led Latin American think tank and innovation agency. So this is where my perspective is coming from. So one of the things we're working on is, okay, let's create a Latin American perspective. What is the metaverse for us? What could it mean? What are our specific challenges? And producing a report on that so that the world can see that we're in the conversation. We also had a dialogue series, which not only served, and it was only with people from Latin America, including the Caribbean, including Brazil, everyone. We were very excited about that. And one of the unforeseen results of that is that we created a repository of Latin American experts. You can find it on metaversolat.com, where you can see experts from Latin America in different topics of the metaverse, like metaverse and philosophy, metaverse industry, etc. And then one of our most exciting projects is also contributing to the global conversation from Latin America, not complementing it with this perspective, but rather complementing it from the global challenges that we're facing. You know, what will the metaverse look like for education? We're creating a pilot with a multilateral organization on that, hoping to contribute our findings. And also with Meta, we're running a policy prototype on what privacy could look like in the metaverse. This is in Uruguay. Working with small and medium companies and also the government and truly all of the actors of internet governance. So there's the Inter-American Development Bank, there's Meta, there's civil society through us, and the Uruguayan government. We're all working together to see what the lessons learned from that experiment can be and create initial policy recommendations that, you know, touch upon tech standards, but also societal standards. Because when we look at the internet, maybe the focus on Web 2 was a lot on the technical side, but there's a whole societal aspect that is becoming more and more important every day. So we're trying to address that as well and contribute to the global conversation from every side. And I know tomorrow there's a conversation on the Indian perspective of the metaverse, which I encourage you to attend to listen to different challenges.
Thank you so much, Claudia. And I love that you rounded out there by talking about how this is a global challenge. So I know we're all working away in our various different areas of innovation. And just to sort of ground the panel back and sort of the original topic here is sort of interoperability or standards for innovation. What is at stake if this goes wrong? What is at stake if, for example, industry doesn't step up, doesn't fill the space, and governments just get fed up and say, you know what, we're just gonna regulate this. We're just gonna make it work the way we want to. Jesus, you mentioned the EU. I'd love to get your perspective on that, but I want to hear from everybody on the panel on this too.
Well, I think why it's needed. You mentioned it, interoperability. Many people is thinking right now mostly about decentralization or centralization topic, like this dichotomy, okay, this should be this or this. That's not really so relevant. What is relevant is that it's interoperable, okay? Something that you can build right now, especially for small and medium companies, we were talking, those are the ones that definitely need interoperability. Why? Because a big company can make a mistake and go to a concrete metaverse experience, and if it doesn't work because nobody goes there, well, they can basically switch. With a marketing budget, they can switch to another one, okay, that is more successful. But for small and medium companies, this is absolutely critical, okay? You have to be sure that you can build something that you can reuse, that you can extend, that you can potentially remove from there and move to another place without a huge investment. So that's, for me, what could be grown, basically the opposite, you know? The metaverse has been growing massively without any kind of standards. Right now, the first ones are start to appear in like, in formats and for scenes, for objects, okay, for avatars also, okay? If you buy something for your avatar that you spend your own money for wearing some sneakers like this one, okay, what will happen if you move to another metaverse? You won't have those, okay? Will you be able to wear it again or reshape it for a new avatar? So all of those things are critical if we want to make of the metaverse something that is massively adopted.
It's a great point. Amy, you mentioned you're in the XRA and the Metaverse Standards Forum. Do these kinds of conversations come up there?
Yes, absolutely, because really they're being built to be forward-looking, right? You're looking at the future and what are the things, again, going back to barriers of entry or problems that could happen. I mean, that's why Cleanbox exists, because we knew maybe 100 people might share a headset, hopefully not, but you're not going to scale that if you can't do it safely. If there's a risk of contagion or somebody doesn't try something, they might be polite about it, but they're not going to tell you, yeah, I didn't want to put it on after the last person. That's why we exist. So when I look at standards and look at the way XRA is doing things, it's collaborative. And the reason for that is we're trying to think of what could prevent this from future adoption, from future success. And the best way to do that is to have conversations saying, this is your specialty, this is your specialty, this is what you do well, you engage with this group and you engage with this one. Let's kind of be, have this rising tide here so that we can get to a point where those standards are just comfortable because we've adopted them together.
And that's a really great point there, the value of collaboration. We're really short on time, but I want to just hear in 30 seconds or less from everybody on this panel, what is your key takeaway as to why interoperability is relevant to this audience? I'm going to go in reverse order. Claudia, we'll go with you first.
Perfect. So I noticed a lot of the stands outside were about education, for instance, and I think that the use of Metaverse for good, for achieving the SDGs, is a really exciting opportunity. But how do you make sure that that makes sense? We've also talked a lot about, how can you make sure you have a good return on investment? So if all of the industry is following one standard, you also want to make sure that these uses that are not purely commercial but also are looking for a societal impact can follow them, so they don't fall behind and kind of stay in their own individual virtual world bubbles, but can collaborate with the rest of kind of the metaverse economy, the metaverse platform, the other virtual worlds present there. So that's why I think it matters. We need to make sure that everyone can be on the same playing ground to give everyone the opportunity to work on what they want in the metaverse, be it education, health, and other priority topics.
I love that, avoiding fragmentation to achieve these bigger goals. Simone?
Yeah, I agree with what Jesus said, and Amy and Claudia. So for me, Metaverse and XR are not an evolution, are not a revolution, they are an evolution. So Meta, for example, has been working with XR since before 2014 when you bought Oculus. So we are seeing now the results of the work that we have been doing for ages. And as Mark said, the Metaverse is not going to be created by one company. So to make this a reality, we have to work together, small, medium, and big and large companies, to facilitate, to make things easier for the consumer, for the developers, and most importantly, we have to work together to build together a metaverse that we are proud of.
And that is a great note to end this on, that it's not going to be any dominant, siloed, discrete metaverse, that it is a collective of everybody's action together. Panelists, thank you so much for your time. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you so much, everybody.